Hi, my name is Marie Chang, and today I'm going to draw myself as a capybara in a scene from BOJACK Horseman. I will be using this existing design that I did of me as a capybara, and this still with BOJACK and Princess Carolyn. For this still, I knew I wanted to draw myself as a wedding crasher, of course, and I really wanted to draw my character dancing in the background, almost ruining this nice, sweet moment from the show. And so I started off by thumbnailing some little poses of different dance moves and then circling the ones that I thought were funny and also just looked like they could fit the poses that were in the show. I started off with a couple and just experimented with different moves until I eventually settled on one that felt right. And it's this one right here. I just liked that it was clear that my character was dancing, but it wasn't so goofy and cartoony that it felt like, I was breaking my limbs, or that it would really stand out too much and make it seem like there's no way I could have been part of the show at all. So I settled on this, and then once I had the rough shape of that pose, I started going in and doing some rough line art for my character. As I'm doing the rough line art, I'm just thinking about what the actual volume and shape of the surface is underneath, and so sometimes I'll draw lines under just to make sure that I know like where the leg is turning or what direction this arm is going. And for me, that helps me later on when I'm doing the final line art. Even if I'm drawing something now that you're not gonna see in the final version, if it's important for me now to know that it's there, then I'm gonna draw it and include it anyways. So now I'm gonna just make sure that the proportions match my original design and that all the cloth and fabric is kind of behaving in a natural way. I want it to look like I'm mid-dance and that I'm dramatically enjoying myself at this wedding that I was certainly not invited to because I'm not dressed for. But that's kind of the idea and the story behind this moment. And as you can see here, sometimes I'll redraw the same thing just like 100 times. Like I just could not get the perspective or proportions of these legs right. So I straight up erased all of my work and just redid it. And if that's what it takes to get the final product, sometimes that's what you gotta do. I changed the positioning of my feet because this looked a lot more natural to me. And I'm glad that I did this because before, with that foot turned upwards, it just didn't look like it was a believable position for any kind of a human-like being. And since the characters in BOJACK Horseman do tend to behave and move realistically like human beings would in our world, I wanted to make sure that that was reflected in this pose. I decided to draw myself with a little tongue sticking out because why not? And now I'm just going through and fine-tuning some of the proportions of the hands and the arms and trying to nail down the details on my clothing and just getting all the shapes there and feeling like it's like a real solid thing that could exist. I also feel like it helps me a lot to, as I repeatedly say, invert the drawing, just because I'll see things from a different perspective. Even when I'm doing little details like this, I'll still, invert the drawing to make sure it looks good, no matter what view I'm observing the item from. I also really like to take my time with this. Sometimes I will step away from the drawing for hours and then return to it with fresh eyes, and then suddenly I'll be able to do the drawing really quickly. Whereas if I had just sat there and stared at it for hours, unhappy with my progress, it would have just wasted a lot of time. So even though you're looking at this time-lapse version, just always know that most of these drawings take me hours in total, and oftentimes I take a lot of breaks when I'm doing even one drawing. So now I have the rough, clean line down, or the rough version of whatever the clean line is gonna be. And I'm gonna start doing the clean line art by lowering the opacity of the layer underneath it, and then inverting the image so that I can start from this view and kind of see whether I want to keep the pose facing this way or change it. Sometimes I'll have a vision for the drawing and then as I'm working through it realize that it's better a different way. And the great thing about digital art is that there's a lot of flexibility in adapting to changing your idea partway in a way that, you know, doesn't always exist if you're drawing traditionally on paper. So now I'm just gonna, you know, finish up that clean line. I added a little bit of indication that there was some fur on my head just to reflect the original design and also the way the characters in the show are drawn. And now I just get to do the fun part of adding all these little details in. It's nice when you get to this stage because you've done the hard work, hopefully, of making sure all the proportions are there and the volumes are there, and now it's just making sure that your art is true to that earlier work. And typically this part is some of the stuff that I enjoy more. Now I'm moving my original one around just to figure out the proportions of the face. But yeah, this looks pretty good to me, and now we're just gonna work on the color. So I'm starting by filling the entire drawing with this blue color because that's the color of the light in this scene. And now I'm going to use a gradient, or I think it's more of like an airbrush, to paint some white over it, which reflects where the lightest part of my drawing will be. I think that's gonna be around my face, but you can kind of look at the original still that you're referencing and see where the lighting's at. And once I have that layer down, I'm gonna start a fresh layer and just redo the colors and art style that I did for the original character design. I like to start off doing all the flat colors first and the base color, then I'll go back through and color in the details and also add some of the texture in the fur that you see here. But for the most part, filling in the colors is pretty simple and pretty direct. I'm gonna make sure that my eyelids are a slightly lighter color, just the way that I have it in my original design. And I'm just gonna color pick some of those textures to make sure that it matches up. But, you know, use your best judgment and see what looks good to you. Again, I like doing it this way because it allows me to draw everything with the original color, and then I can just take the bluish, whitish layer that I painted earlier and place it on top and use different filters to get the lighting that I want instead of having to reflect that lighting in the painting itself. So now I'm just gonna resize and place it and choose the type of lighting I want. I liked this because it looked like it fit into the show. And yeah, here we go. This is me as a capybara dancing my way through a wedding that I definitely was not invited to. Thanks again for watching, and please invite me to your weddings.